It is Sunday, the 3rd of January, 2016. I'm just starting up my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. So another year has started, and Montreal Unitarians, to say nothing of Unitarian Universalists more generally, and the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston in particular, have failed to respond in responsibility to the spirit that bloweth where it listeth, as it were. That's a little quote from James Luther Adams, and it's about responding in a responsible manner to the spirit, whatever that may be. And Unitarian Universalists do a terrible, terrible job of responding in responsibility to legitimate grievances that I and actually many, many other people have about clergy misconduct, anti-religious intolerance and bigotry on the part of not only ordinary Unitarian Universalists, but also Unitarian Universalist clergy, and so on. Just going to check my camera. Yeah, I had some difficulty getting it started this morning. It was starting and stopping, so I want to make sure it was still running. My protest began as a protest against the anti-religious intolerance and bigotry of Reverend Ray Drennan and also other lay leaders of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, such as Frank Green and others. Began as a protest against falsely and maliciously labeling an interreligious event I'd organized as a cult, labeling me as psychotic because I'm claiming a religious experience, and so on. But even when I first began the protest, it included injustices and abuses that did not affect me directly. As a result of filing a complaint against Reverend Ray Drennan, as a result of speaking with advocates for clergy misconduct victims, such as Reverend Deborah Pope Lance, I quickly became aware of Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct problem. My own grievances were not to do with sexual misconduct. It was all non-sexual misconduct. But as I said, as a result of seeking justice for the non-sexual clergy misconduct of Reverend Ray Drennan, I was told by, as I said, Reverend Deborah Pope Lance and others about, pretty egregious clergy sexual misconduct that had never been properly handled by the UUA. And so when my protest began in May of 1998, I was already aware of that. And early in the protest, perhaps not in the first few picket signs, but certainly within a few months of beginning my protest, some of my picket signs at least hinted at clergy sexual misconduct. Perhaps most notably my picket sign that simply said "unsafe sect" with a question mark. I mean, that's obviously a play on words and obviously references the term safe sex. So asking the question "unsafe sect" with a question mark does at least hint at the unsafe clergy sexual misconduct that occurs within Unitarian Universalism. But I generally used broader terms, like clergy misconduct, clergy abuse, because I wanted to address all forms of clergy misconduct, clergy abuse, both sexual and non-sexual. So I didn't really put a huge emphasis on the sexual misconduct in terms of my outdoor protest. But then in June of 2012, the Unitarian Universalist Association thought it'd be a really good idea to hire Stikeman Elliott Barrister and Solicitor's litigation lawyer, Maitre Marc-André Coulombe, to falsely accuse me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for allegedly making unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. That's an exact quote from the letter that I was served with in June of 2012. So here's the UUA falsely accusing me of making unfounded and vicious allegations about Unitarian Universalist ministers committing pedophilia and or rape, when in fact I had blogged about cases where Unitarian Universalists were actually convicted of such despicable crimes. So there was nothing unfounded about my blog posts about the subject. And most ironically, even if I was guilty of that pretext of making false accusations, doing so would not actually constitute blasphemous libel. The only circumstance under which I could be guilty of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blogging about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists, whether truthfully or untruthfully, is if Unitarian Universalists held such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape to be sacred to Unitarian Universalism. And unless there's some secret doctrine of Unitarian Universalism that I'm not aware of, that's not the case yet, anyway. So basically a completely and utterly false accusation of blasphemous libel in an effort to intimidate me into removing blog posts that actually tell the truth about convicted rapists such as Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell and Richard Buell of First Parish in Norwell in Massachusetts, a parishioner of Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein, who isn't even a minister to my knowledge. So since then I've actually placed more emphasis on the sexual misconduct, and I've even specifically referred to pedophilia and rape on my picket signs, within the context of protesting against the fact that Unitarian Universalists are trying to hide pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalists by falsely accusing me of blasphemous libel. So here we are, it's the beginning of 2016. In spite of the repeated demands that the UUA must formally withdraw its false blasphemous libel accusation and apologize for bringing it against me, it has not done so. It hasn't acted on it either. It basically can't. I mean, the accusation is completely and utterly false. So if the Unitarian Universalist Association went to the Montreal police force and attempted to have me charged with the criminal act of blasphemous libel on the false basis that I'd made unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, well then the Unitarian Universalist Association would actually be guilty of a criminal act known as public mischief, because it's public mischief to bring a false complaint to the police. If you bring a false complaint that someone is committing a crime to the police, that is itself a crime. It's a crime known as public mischief. Okay, we have a police van coming this way, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're coming to have a chat with me. I suspect they'll just drive right by, but you never know. Got a supervisor, 1185, so that's a supervisor from station 11, so that's the station that does in fact have jurisdiction here. So again, it could just be a routine driving by, or it could be because somebody at the church called the police. It would be very foolish if they did, for all I'm doing is standing here with a couple of picket signs, and anyhow, we shall continue in our circulation. Okay, we got a fire truck, so maybe there's some possible, it's going the other way. Maybe the police van presence was related to possible, not necessarily emergency because there were no sirens, but oh look, there's John Inder, the man who totally condones the Unitarian Universalist Association's false blasphemous libel against me. He's also actually one of the Montreal Unitarians who had the unmitigated gall to refer to Creation Day as a cult to my face. This happened some years ago now, but yes, John Inder, while I was protesting, actually came up to me and in a discussion that we had regarding my protest, basically said, you know, yes, Creation Day is a cult, so you add him to the list of Montreal Unitarians who were stupid enough to say that to my face. You know, others said it behind my back, but John is one of the handful that actually was foolish enough to say it to my face. And he's guilty of quite a few other incredibly foolish things.
Thank you very much.
I believe this is a long-time member of the church who berated me the last time I was protesting. I haven't actually put that video up on YouTube yet, but when I was protesting here a couple of weeks ago, this woman, whose name will remain anonymous, I do know it, I could say it, but I'll grant her some anonymity, basically started yelling at me, you know, for my protest, you know, and you know, it's not the correct approach. You know, the proper thing to do is to go, oh, we have a problem, you know, maybe we should find out what the problem is and deal responsibly with it. But no, Unitarian Universalists in general, and Montreal Unitarians in particular, seem to prefer to wallow in willful ignorance and psychological denial when you bring up certain problems. Anyhow, we'll just continue our little first protest of 2016, and I will add that, you know, I've made a few New Year's resolutions. One of those New Year's resolutions is that I will make another serious effort to get the story of the Unitarian Universalist Association's immoral, unethical, borderline criminal, and yes, quite frankly, batshit crazy misuse of blasphemy law to cover up pedophilia and rape reported in mainstream news media. I have brought the story to the attention of various mainstream news outlets in the past, and for whatever reason they have not reported the story yet. In at least two cases I have very good reasons to believe that the reason the story wasn't reported was because Unitarian Universalists wielded influence within the news organizations. I don't mind saying I'm speaking about A, the Montreal Gazette, and B, the Boston Globe. In both cases, both newspapers have never at any time reported even the slightest aspect of this newsworthy story. And in the case of the Montreal Gazette, the Gazette's justice reporter, Sue Montgomery, is and has been a member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal for quite some time. Well, I shouldn't say is, because I don't know if, you know, this very day, Sunday, January 3rd, 2016, Sue Montgomery is still a, you know, signed up member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, but she has been attending the Unitarian Church of Montreal for quite some time. She's been a member of the church for quite some time, and in spite of repeated requests that she report this story. She has not done so. And I have reason to believe that not only has she not reported the story herself, but she's wielded influence within the Gazette to ensure that no one else reports the story. So that's one of them. But there's also the Gazette's Words columnist, Mark Abley, who's a member of the church, who may or may not have wielded influence within the Gazette. There's also Harvey Shepard, the former religion columnist for the Gazette, who again may or may not have wielded whatever influence he may have to prevent the story from being reported. He claims that he has not done so. I asked him within the last 6 months or so whether he had ever wielded his influence with the Gazette to try and ensure that the story wasn't reported, and he claimed he had not done so. But I have very good reason to believe that Sue Montgomery did wield her influence within the Gazette, and as the Justice reporter, she actually had some responsibility to report the story, especially the UUA's misuse of blasphemy law to cover up pedophilia and rape. I mean, if that's not, a criminal justice story that's worthy of some reporting. Okay, I see another police car up by the Vendo Metro station. So, again, might have absolutely nothing to do with this protest. I suspect it has nothing to do with the protest, simply because the SPVM, they've repeatedly interfered in this protest over the years. But in 2012, there were three... it's always happy when I'm accused of blasphemy by Unitarians. You don't get many honors and privileges much greater than that. So
I'm not accusing you of anything.
Not you. The Unitarian Universalist Association has accused me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blogging about Unitarian